Welcome to Exit Frag. My name is Zeph. Today we're going to be answering the most asked questions about VCT China heading into Masters Bangkok. I'm your host Zeph. I'm joined by Esports Andy, and welcome to the show.
Welcome.
So,
Yes,
Andy, I've not watched one thing of China this season,
yeah,
mostly because
and
it's
I
so
pretty
bad.
much watched everything. I've watched everything other than maybe like a couple of the first round of elimination matches, just because I was like the bottom of the floor, and I made like a whole video about China, but I was like the bottom of the floor really is still like Chinese teams like Tai Lu, um, All Gamers, Wolves. They all are kind of like not good right now. Like they're
That
probably one of the worst teams
that's
in VCT.
That's interesting because there was a lot of people hyping up Wolves in the offseason. Is there any like particular reason they weren't able to get out of the lower round one?
I think the main issue was that Juicy wasn't like so Juicy was on Bleed when they went up and won Ascension back to get up there, and then
Mm-hmm.
he had to leave because he was like 17. And so that was like the big hope was like Juicy's just gonna be insane, he's gonna be cracked, he's gonna be this prodigy, and he's like not been.
Mm.
And so when that's not happening, and then you have Lysor who was on he was either on BBL or I can just click. He was on FPX. He was on FPX. He was a pretty good player, but like there was no one like super like hyped on this team if Juicy wasn't doing super good.
Got it.
So and then they played the best middle tier team, which is like Nova. And I
Mm.
think Nova has a chance, and we'll talk about this a little bit later. Nova does have a chance to, I think, make champions. I think that's a bold prediction, but they have like some pretty good players. They lost to to be eliminated. They lost to Dragon Rangers, and then they lost to Edward Gaming. And Dragon Rangers, well, a lot of people have been pretty like low on them
Mm.
as like an ascended team from last year, and they made it to Shanghai, but they're pretty low on them, and they played pretty well. They played well all the way up until EDG went on an insane run as like the main protagonist of like everything.
Yeah.
like
Yeah, so I see right here on lower round 3 that EDG is present. First of all, how did they lose to Trace, and where is Trace coming from that they are now like performing rather well?
well, so Trace was already good like last year. Or like they were good in Chinese standards, but you
Mm.
know, China was still kind of behind the times, but Trace has been looking super good. I thought they had a good chance to beat EDG, but then once EDG like put on that star performance of because they broke like the record of like round wins in a row
Mm.
by doing those back to back 13 O's. But before that, to be knocked down, they had to face Trace, and Trace just kind of had they used the I think best comp right now on Bind, which is the Deadlock Vice,
Mm.
and they just shut down like Edward Gaming could not on their own map pick play the attack at all. Like they
Interesting.
just kept getting isolated. They couldn't really do anything with the KO like or the Tejo or anything. Like Kangkang went 11-15 on that map. And that was after heybay just had an insane Lotus. like he
Mm.
was getting some insane kills. Uh King just didn't look that comfortable in the neon. Like, but he got better over the. That's the whole thing. Everyone that like looked at the scoreboard and was like 13-4, 13-4. Oh, EDG's like toast. Then like you watch all their lower bracket games and you're like, oh no, they're like world champions.
I see.
But like Trace had their number on that day, and that's why like when they then came to the grand finals, Edward Gaming kind of like anti-stratted.
I see. Was the game between Trace and Bilibili like close? Because I was rather impressed when I watched them at Soup because they were keeping up with NRG, but then obviously they kind of like regressed a little bit in their like last map.
Billy, I just kind of they have good maps and they have bad maps, and this
Mm.
is like one of the issues with Bilibili. This is why I didn't think they were gonna make it, because they won the game. that game against FPX, but they also had like one of the easier routes
Right, because
up to the
they had
finals.
the bye, and then they had to play against ZmjjKK Gaming, and then FPX did they make roster changes? Like what?
No, no, I don't think they did. No, they're pretty much. Is Yosemite new? I don't think so. No.
No, Yosemite was with them at Champions.
Yeah, so like they didn't really make any changes. They just didn't look as explosive anymore
Mm-hmm.
as they like back when everyone was like, "Oh, FPX is like actually insane, the second best Chinese team."
Mm-hmm.
Um, they just weren't as explosive. That's why like when they got into aim duels, they lost. Dragon Ranger pretty much outdueled them just straight up
I
in the
see.
lower rounds. And also like so it just wasn't that big. Like I would say XLG is better than FPX because I think XLG has Rarga, who is um I think one of the best duelists.
Mm-hmm.
Like all around duelist. He can play like any duelist you need and he's gonna be kind of insane. Uh so like FPX just I wasn't impressed by them at all.
I see. Yeah, and they fell off midway through the tournament.
Yeah,
Um,
and but like EDG's run in the lowers, like I said, they did back-to-back 13-0s to eliminate both Ascension teams. And both the Ascension teams aren't bad. Like they're really good. I think they're both top six teams in the league uh, in China. So then they just kind of like turned into championship form. Like Kangkang went insane. Simon's fragging way better than he was in champions. So that adds so much. Smoggy, because right now no Smoggy is nobody. I think is the IGL. Um,
it
yeah,
was
nobody's the IGL.
nobody's the agile. Interesting.
Yeah, and he's been doing good. There's been a lot of really interesting rounds. This is like why I think the whole league as a whole is back to kind of like where everyone else is because just like their strats, they're anti-stratting. The coaching staffs are pretty good. They can come up with ideas, plans. They can adapt, and that was one thing that in years past China wasn't really good at. They could win that first game, and
Mm-hmm.
then people would learn like, oh, that's the crazy thing they'll do, and then they'll lose. Like unlike Paper Rex, who then just like shifts again.
I see.
But yeah, I think a lot of these teams are like way underrated. Like people are still putting them a lot of these teams pretty low, and I think it's like more mixed up now with the
Well,
rest of the leagues.
yeah, we even saw it at Champs last year. The fact that Trace and EDG were both able to get out of group stage and even make it to the playoffs. Do I think it's going to happen again with all the other teams in the region? I mean, I don't know, but maybe you can give me a little more insight. I don't know if you've been watching a lot of EMEA, but EMEA is looking way more competitive than in years prior, and I'm actually more excited about that league than I've ever been.
I've actually with the EMEA because as much as I can watch it, um, my whole thing with the EMEA is I just think the top level isn't as I think it's more competitive, but I think it's more competitive like lower.
Yeah. Lower but
Like
more
it's more
competitive. Yeah,
compact in the middle than
I see.
I think in years past, unless like Team Heretics all of a sudden picks it up. I think with Edward or with China, it's kind of more spread. Like there's really bad teams. I think Edward Gaming and Trace, and I would say Bilibili sometimes looks like a top tier team, but
Mhm.
then they like struggle. Dragon Ranger sometimes does, but they don't have the ideas. And then XLG, I just think needs a little more time. But like a lot of these even mid-table teams for China are like would compete like if like let's say BBL made it in EMEA.
Mhm.
I think they would compete they could compete like they would have the same like trajectory as XLG
I see.
or something like that. Like or even like another team that no one's really talking about is JDG looked really good. Like for like they had Stu, right? Yeah, Stu is insane. One of the best players that if he gets into another internet if he gets into an international, everyone's gonna be talking about him.
Uh-huh.
But there's so many like talented players in this that like if these smaller teams get into a big Masters event, they could upset a team that like no one would have really thought of.
What the hell is going on with JDG's name?
The JD Mall JDG,
Yeah.
and then underneath it JDG
Yeah,
Esports.
in parentheses. I don't know what's going on there, but I'm sure it makes sense for the Chinese fans.
Oh, that's so funny. But yeah, this league's an interesting one. I think people need to really be paying attention to them, especially after winning the world championship. I think they're always going to be in contention for a trophy.
No,
Like their
I
top
agree.
teams
I agree.
be like, oh, Trace isn't that good. They got destroyed. It's like, nah, Trace could beat some teams.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it just comes from the fact that people are not watching China, and it makes sense because there's no English broadcast, and it just makes it difficult for everybody to tune in and just watch
hmm
like games in Chinese, especially at like 2 a.m. and
It's
6 a.m. Like, come on, man.
it's pretty crazy times.
Yeah.
Yep, that's why I had to like drastically change my schedule and
To
then and
to
not
watch
watch
the game.
EMEA much.
No, it's fine. I mean, EMEA has been fun, but like I do get like what you're saying. That was my freaking questions and answers for Andy this week about VCT China. Join us next week when we talk about more VCT related things.